falling asleep. So, and I had a second cup of coffee this morning so that I wouldn't fall asleep during the message. So we should be good. I'm so glad that you're here this morning. And I want to talk to you this morning about a disease that is running rampant in America today. In fact, this disease has raged unchecked for far too long. It affects young children, it affects senior adults, and misery is left in its wake. From abandoned dreams, lost hopes, ravaged marriages, the disease has gone on long enough. Today is the day to declare war on the pestilence that goes by the name of I can't. Didn't see that one coming, did you? When you hear those two words put together, I can't, what pictures, what images, what people perhaps come to your mind when you hear the words, I can't? You were here last week. You don't want to ask a question, then generally I'm looking for a response. So I would love to hear from some of you what those words mean to you. What images, what pictures come to mind when you hear the words, I can't?
Failure.
Failure. What?
Giving up.
What? Giving up.
Not in my vocabulary.
Not, who said that? Awesome! Woo! Not my vocabulary.
The little blue engine.
Oh, yeah. The little engine could or whatever. Yeah, make it over. Sleep. I think I can. What? Sleep. Sleep? Sleep? I can't. Oh, I can't sleep. Okay. All right.
Responding to a parent's request.
A child responding to a parent's request.
Play in the dirt. Play in the dirt.
Play in the dirt.
Lack of confidence.
Lack of confidence. Wow. Now, great ideas. Think for just a moment how destructive that word can't really is. Are there things that sometimes you have sensed God wanting you to do that maybe you just felt like, I'm not qualified to do that? Get somebody else, God. Kind of what Moses said, wasn't it? But I just can't talk very well. Well, take your brother Aaron along with you then. You know, Gideon, one of the great victories, 300 men with nothing but torches and trumpets, defeat an army of like 180,000 people. And he kept saying, I can't. Surely God, you got the wrong guy. I mean, throughout Scripture, you see situations where these people say, I can't. But once they surrender to God and allow Him to work through them, it's amazing what happens. But think about it personally. When have you said, I can't? Because that word attacks our self-control. I just can't stop fill in the blank. I just can't stop smoking. I just can't stop drinking. I just can't stop looking at internet porn. I just can't stop, whatever it is. It attacks our careers sometimes. Well, I just can't get a job. I just can't keep a job. It attacks our marriages. Well, I just cannot forgive him for what he did to me. Or I just can't forgive her for what she said and how she embarrassed me publicly. It can even attack our faith. I just can't believe that God would forgive me after what I've done. Can't. If you find yourself using that word at times, you might want to just jot down what it is that you feel like you just can't do, especially if it's something you feel like God is leading you to do. Because before this morning is over, I want to help us turn those two words of I can't into God can. And that I can with God's help. If Joshua had mumbled those words, no one would have blamed him. I mean, the book of the Bible that bears his name begins with some tragic news. Very first verse. After the death of Moses, I mentioned his death last week, but I don't think we fully grasp how significant Moses was to the Hebrew people. I mean, there was no one like Moses. When they were enslaved in Egypt, Moses confronted Pharaoh. When the Red Sea was raging and they had to get across it, Moses prayed for help. God delivered them. When these ex-slaves were hungry or thirsty or confused, Moses is the guy who intervened. And God provided food, water, and even the 10 Commandments. Moses meant more to the children of Israel than Queen Victoria, Napoleon, and Alexander the Great meant to their people. Even George Washington had to share Mount Rushmore with 3 other presidents. In fact, if Moses' face had ever been carved into Mount Sinai, that would have been it. They wouldn't have allowed anybody else to have their image there. That's how important Moses was to the children of Israel. So to lose Moses was not only to lose their leader, but in many ways it was to lose their cause. And they had just lost him. He had died. Let that sink in for a moment. Imagine their dismay, their grief, even their fear. How do we go forward now? And yet the grass had not even grown over his grave. And God told Joshua in verse 2, Moses is dead, now therefore arise. Arise. I don't know about you, but after losing the most important leader in our nation's history, whoever that is for you, I don't think I would feel much like jumping into action. You see, our approach would be probably more like, now therefore, grieve. Now therefore, retreat. Now therefore, reorganize. Or in our society today, now therefore, go find a therapist. This church went through something very similar. You lost a leader. Maybe you went through some of those same emotions. And yet God told Joshua, now therefore, arise. And I believe that's exactly what this congregation did. I think you might agree with me, as we're already starting to see a theme throughout the book of Joshua. And that theme that's developing is this. God's power will always alter the final score. God's power will always alter the final score. Moses might be dead, but God is very much alive. Woo! Hey, there we go. So the leader... Yeah! Here we go. You might have sound here in a minute. I'm going to shout. Amen. Wow. So light. The leader of their, may be dead at this point, but what they began to realize is that the real leader, God Himself, is still very much alive. And yet in spite of all this, Joshua still has some great reasons to say I can. In fact, you might say that he had over 2 million reasons to say I can. According to a census back in the book of Numbers, just as they were about ready to enter the Promised Land, they did a census of all of the fighting men, the men 20 years of age and older, not counting the Levites. They were excluded from military service. And assuming that 2/3 of these men were married, and that they had on average 3 children, that would have made the total number of Israelites entering the Promised Land of around 2 million. Here's the point. I mean, I don't know about you, I like numbers. Some of you probably find numbers boring and hated math and all that kind of stuff. But my point is this. Joshua was not leading a Boy Scout troop into the Promised Land. Okay? 2 million people. The population of, let's say, about the size of Houston, Texas. I don't know why, that's why I went there, I just did. I mean, just think about this. 2 million experienced greenhorns who had never passed this way before. Oh yeah, they maybe learned to fight off snakes and windstorms in the wilderness, but the mighty walls of Jericho, the ironclad chariots of the Canaanites, the barbaric, bloodthirsty barbarians of these nations across the Jordan River, to do battle with them? Perizzites, I just love that name. Hittites, Canaanites, Amorites, to name a few. I mean, those are probably just odd-sounding names to us, but those same names had struck fear into the hearts of the Hebrew people just one generation earlier. They were scared to death of those guys. Their giants were grasshoppers. These tribes were a cesspool of evil. They appear on the pages of Scripture as early as God's promise to Abram, all the way back in Genesis 15. Listen to these two verses from Genesis 15, verses 13 and verse 16. God said to Abram, "Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed 400 years." Of course, we know that was their time in Egypt. But look at verse 16. "Then in the fourth generation, they will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete."
Wow.
The iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. For 8 centuries, the Amorites had cultivated a culture of degradation. They sacrificed innocent babies in worship. They practiced orgies in the city. They dedicated themselves to witchcraft and idolatry. Biblical scholar Eugene Peterson called the Canaan of the 13th century BC a snake pit of child sacrifice and sacred prostitution. People who were ruthlessly devoted to using the most innocent and vulnerable members of their community, babies and virgins, to manipulate their gods for gain. That was the area that the children of Israel were moving into. The book of Jubilees, which was written around the 2nd century BC, called the Amorites an evil and sinful people whose wickedness surpasses that of any other and whose life will be cut short on earth. That's what was confronting Joshua and the children of Israel. Faced with obstacles like that, it's easy to see why he could have very easily said, "I just can't. Get somebody else." And think of the excuses that he could have used. Excuse number one, well, our leader, my mentor, Moses, is dead. Excuse number two, these people are greenhorns. They're not ready for battle. They're not equipped for battle. You expect us to go in there and fight? And then, of course, excuse number three, Canaanites eat people like us for breakfast. And now comes the best part. Because Joshua made none of those excuses. No one would have blamed him if he had, but he didn't. He never declared defeat. And before Joshua could even begin to assemble any fears, to say, "God, I don't know what you're thinking here," God gave him a resounding reason for faith and for hope. Joshua chapter 1, verse 2. This is from the Revised Standard Version. "Arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land which I am giving to them." Not the land that I might give to them. Not the land that you must conquer. Not the land that you must prove worthy of to receive. Not the land that you must earn or confiscate or purchase, but the land I am giving to them. Think of it this way. The transaction has already happened. The land had already been transferred into their name. The conquest was already accomplished. Joshua was sent to take the land, not to take the land rather, but to receive it. I don't want you to take the land, I want you to just receive it. I've already taken it for you, is what God is telling him. Victory was certain because the victory was God's. The children of Israel had a new land because their father had promised it to them. I don't know about you, but man, I was like, say what? I mean, after he picks his jaw up off the ground, God explained the dimensions of this gift. Joshua chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. I love this. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you. From the wilderness to Lebanon, as far as the great river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and to the great sea, Mediterranean, toward the going down of the sun, all shall be your territory. Wow. I want you to keep in mind the fact that the Israelites, they were basically gypsies. They were nomads. They did not even own so much as a sandbox property. And yet in one grand divine decree, they were given the deed to the land of their dreams. And in one of Israel's finest moments, Joshua said, yes. And he received his inheritance. That's an interesting word. Because it's a word that appears throughout the book. In fact, one author said that the word inheritance is to Joshua's book what delis are to Manhattan. Everywhere. I've never been there, so I can't say. I don't know, but I just can imagine. I mean, the word itself appears nearly 60 times in the book of Joshua. The command to possess the land is seen 5 times. The great accomplishment of the Hebrew people came down to this. In chapter 24, verse 28, right near the end of the book, it says, so Joshua let the people depart, each to his own inheritance. So my question to you this morning is this. Is it time for you to receive your inheritance? You have one. Because if you have ever given your life to Jesus Christ, God has given Canaan to you. He has blessed you with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places in Christ, Ephesians 1:3. Every spiritual blessing is yours. Note the tense. He has blessed, not he will bless, not that he might bless, not someday he might possibly consider blessing you. You see, the promised land property has been placed in your name. The courthouse records in heaven have been changed. God has already given you your Canaan. You already have everything you need to be, everything that God desires you to be. You have access to every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places. And you know what? This might be the best kept secret in all of Christianity. Because we underestimate what happened to us upon our conversion. Christian author Dwight Edwards has observed that many Christians view their conversion as something like a car wash. You'll like it. You go in a filthy clunker. And you come out with your sins washed away, a cleansed clunker. The conversion is so much more than just a removal of sin. It's a deposit of power. It's as though your high-mileage 2-cylinder engine, I like to think of a lawnmower go-kart engine, has been extracted and a brand new Ferrari engine was mounted in your frame. Woo! All the guys are like, yeah, some power now. And so here we have this power that's been instilled in us because we have been embedded with the essence of Christ. 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone, by the way, that's all of us. If anyone is in Christ, he or she is a new creation. Old things, the old stuff has passed away. Behold, all things have become new. You are fully equipped. You need more energy? You got it. Do you need more kindness? It's yours. Do you need some more self-control? little more self-discipline, a little more self-confidence. Hebrews 13:21. God will equip you with all you need for doing His will. Wow. Just press the gas pedal. God has given you everything we need. They're giving us everything we need for living a godly life. That's 2 Peter 1:3, New Living Translation. I like that. He's given us everything we need for living a godly life. In other words, the glory days that we talked about last week, they begin really with a paradigm shift. You see, in Canaan, you do not fight for victory. In Canaan, you fight from victory. That's a huge difference. That's a huge shift in thinking. In the wilderness, we strive. But in Canaan, we trust. In the wilderness, we seek God's attention. But in Canaan, we already have God's favor. In the wilderness, we sometimes doubt our salvation. But in Canaan, we know that we are saved. So we move from wanting to have to believing that we already possess it. When you were born into Christ, you were placed into God's royal family. As John 1:12, as many as received Him, to them He gave the right to become children of God. And since you are part of the family, that means you have access to the family blessings. All of them. Ephesians 1:11, in Him also we have obtained an inheritance. Wow. Surprised? Did I caught you off guard this morning? Are you beginning to realize that, man, you have a lot more going for you than make you realize it?
Yes.
Well, you ain't heard nothing yet. They say down south. Paul has described the value of your portfolio in Romans chapter 8, verses 16 and 17. Listen to this. The Spirit of God, the Spirit Himself, bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. Now that's getting good. And if children, then heirs. Heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. That's your portfolio. We are joint heirs with Christ. We share the same inheritance as Jesus Christ. Wow. Our portion is no small payment. We don't inherit leftovers. We don't inherit hand-me-downs. We don't get left out in the cold with the distant cousins like, anyway. I don't know if you do that in your families. Yeah, you guys get out on the porch. But in the tradition of Paul's day, and really throughout the Old Testament, the firstborn son always received a double portion. And then whatever's left over is divided up amongst everybody else. But it's not that way with Christ. Because our standing in the world is identical with Christ. Christ's portion is our portion. Whatever He has, we have. Think about what that means. Jesus cashed checks out of a limitless account. Grudges never corroded Him. Despair didn't control Him. Mood swings didn't touch His joy. His convictions were bulletproof. In fact, Jesus, you could say, was the Fort Knox of faith. And when we give our hearts to Him, He hands us His checkbook. So how do we explain this disconnect? If we are co-heirs with Christ, why do we struggle in this life so much? Our inheritance is perfect peace. And yet so much of our lives are lived like a perfect mess. And we struggle, we strain, we toil. We have access to the joy level of Jesus, and yet we plod along like good old Eeyore. Woe is me. Woe is me. Think it's going to rain today. You can say that around here about every day. Sorry. You know, Eeyore was always one of my favorite characters in Winnie the Pooh. I don't know, good old Eeyore. You always felt kind of sorry for him. And yet God promises to meet every need. And yet we still worry and fret. Why? Why do we do that? You may have your own reasons. I'm going to give you two. And you might have better reasons than what I've got. So think about this. But here's a couple reasons. And if you're a note taker, if you want to write this down, you can. Number one, we don't know about our inheritance. We don't know about our inheritance. No one ever told us about the exceeding greatness of His power toward us who believe. That's Ephesians 1:19. No one ever told us that we fight from victory and not for victory. No one told us that the land is already conquered. Some Christians never live out of their inheritance because they don't know they have one. This is where the trick comes in, because now you do know. Now you do. You see, now you know that you were made for so much more than the wilderness. God saved you from Egypt so that He could bless you in the promised land. Moses had to remind the people that God brought them out from there, that He might bring them into Canaan. And there's a reason for our redemption too. God has brought us out so that He could lead us in. He set us free so He could raise us up. You don't have to wait till you die and reach heaven to receive your inheritance. Yes. The gift has been given. But will you trust it? And therein lies the second reason for the disconnect. We don't really believe in our inheritance. You see, that was the problem of Joshua's ancestors. They didn't really believe that God could give them the promised land. The glory days of the Hebrew children could have begun 4 decades earlier, a point that God alluded to when He spoke to Joshua. When He said, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, as I said to Moses. In other words, God's reminding Joshua, I offer this same promised land to your ancestors 4 decades earlier. And they refused to take me at my word. They refused to go in and claim their inheritance. Don't make that same mistake. Fortunately, Joshua didn't. Much to his credit, he took God at His word and he set about the task of inheriting the land. Do the same. Receive your inheritance. God offers it to you today. You are embedded with the presence of God. Let that sink in. You are embedded with the presence of God. Don't measure your life by your ability. Measure it by God's ability. Even though you cannot forgive, God can. And because God can forgive, guess what? So can you. With His strength. With His power that's indwelling you. Maybe you cannot break that stubborn, bad habit that you've had for years. But God can. And since He can, guess what? So can you. Maybe you can't control your tongue, your temper, even your sexual urges. But God can. And since you have access to every blessing of heaven, you in time will find strength through Him to overcome those. The promised land life is yours for the taking. Make the mental shift from the wilderness to Canaan. Here's what I mean. You see, the wilderness mentality says, I am weak and I'll always be weak. But Canaan people say, I was weak, but I'm getting stronger. Wilderness people say, I'm a victim of my circumstances, of my environment. Promised Land people say, I'm a victor in spite of my circumstances. Wilderness people say, oh, these are just difficult days and I'll never get through them. But God's people say, these are glory days. And God will get me through. Amen. Now imagine what would happen if an entire generation of Christians lived out of their inheritance. Ooh. Boggles the mind, the imagination. I mean, men and women would turn off internet porn. The lonely would find comfort in God instead of the arms of strangers. Struggling couples would spend more time in prayer together and less time being angry with one another. Every orphan would find a home. Children would consider it a blessing to care for their aging parents. A generation of Christians would vacate the wilderness. See, God's power is very great for all who believe. That power is the same as the great strength that God used to raise Christ from the dead. Ephesians 1:19 and 20. It's just like the song. I don't know if you guys listen to Christian radio much out here. Now we were trying to come up with the guy who sings the song. Maybe some of you know it. But the chorus just says, the same power that raised Jesus from the grave lives in us. Who is it?
Jeremy Camp.
Thank you, Camp. I knew it started with a C. Jeremy Camp. The same power that raised Jesus from the grave lives in us. Do we believe it? Do we live like it? That the same steely, burly force that raised him from the dead will turn every I can't into an I can. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ because He gives me the strength. He strengthens me. How many things? All things. All things. A new day awaits you, my friend. A new season of accomplishment, discovery, and strength. So leave every single I can't behind you in the wilderness. Set your God can in front of you. Because it's time to cross the Jordan and enter the promised land and receive your inheritance. Let's pray.